The elevator door slid open with a soft chime, spilling golden morning light into the polished lobby of Bennett Enterprises. The building hummed with quiet confidence. Polished floors, glass walls, the faint scent of expensive coffee. But deep in the quiet corners where no one looked twice, a man in a gray uniform pushed his cart down the hall, humming to himself. His name was Henry, the janitor. He'd been working in the building for nearly 7 years. To most employees, he was invisible, just the man who appeared after hours with a mop and a tired smile. But to one person, he wasn't invisible at all. A small girl named Lily, the CEO's daughter. Every morning, she'd skip into the lobby clutching her pink backpack, her hair tied in 2 tiny braids. "Morning, Mr. Henry," she'd call out, her voice bright enough to make the marble shine. And Henry, who had no children of his own, would always smile back. "Morning, sunshine. You being good today?" "I'm trying," she'd giggle before running off toward the elevator that took her to her mother's office. The very top floor, where Claire Bennett, one of the youngest and most powerful CEOs in the city, ruled with quiet brilliance. Claire was known for her poise. Elegant, unshakable, always in control. But that morning, something felt off. Henry noticed it even from afar. The way she walked too quickly through the lobby, her face pale beneath the glow of her phone screen. She nodded politely at him as she passed, but her hand trembled slightly when she pressed the elevator button. Hours later, the building buzzed with its usual rhythm. Meetings, phone calls, polished shoes clattering across tile. Henry was scrubbing a staircase when he heard it. A scream. Small. Sharp. Terrified. "Help. Somebody help. Mommy's not moving." Henry's mop clattered to the floor as he turned toward the sound. It was Lily, her face streaked with tears, her tiny hands gripping the stair rail. He ran to her. "What happened, sweetheart?" She could barely speak between sobs. "Mommy." She fell. "She's not waking up." Without thinking, Henry scooped her into his arms and sprinted toward the elevator. The doors refused to close fast enough, his heart pounding in his chest. When they reached the top floor, the office was eerily quiet. Claire's assistant was gone. Papers were scattered on the floor near the glass desk. And behind it, Claire lay motionless, one hand clutching her chest. "Call an ambulance." Henry barked, but the little girl was too panicked to move. He grabbed the office phone himself, his rough fingers trembling as he punched in the numbers. 911. "What's your emergency?" "It's Claire Bennett. She's collapsed at Bennett Enterprises. She's not breathing. Is anyone there who can perform CPR?" Henry's gaze dropped to her still form, pale against the polished floor. "Yes," he whispered. "I can." He dropped to his knees, checked her pulse. Nothing. Then he began compressions, steady, strong, whispering under his breath, "Come on, Miss Bennett. You've got a little girl who needs you." Lily clung to his sleeve, sobbing. "Please save her, Mr. Henry. Please." He didn't stop. Not when his arms ached. Not when the seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, a gasp, a fragile, broken sound, but enough to make the world spin back into motion. "She's breathing." Henry breathed out, tears stinging his eyes. "She's breathing, Lily." The paramedics burst through the door moments later. They took over, stabilizing Claire as they rushed her out on a stretcher. Henry stayed behind, his knees shaking, his hands still pressed to the floor where she'd lain. He looked down and saw her phone on the ground. The screen cracked. A message glowed faintly, unsent. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." He swallowed hard, understanding what no one else had yet. Hours passed. The chaos quieted. The office emptied. But Henry stayed. That evening, the hospital called. Claire was stable. The doctor said she'd had a stress-induced cardiac episode, overwork, exhaustion, anxiety. She would recover, but it had been close. Too close. When Claire woke, the first thing she saw was a small face pressed against her hand. "Mommy." Lily's voice broke. "You scared me." Claire smiled weakly. "I'm sorry, baby." Then she noticed the man sitting quietly by the door, still in his janitor's uniform, his eyes weary but kind. "Mr. Henry," she whispered. "You saved me." He stood, embarrassed. "Just did what anyone would have done, ma'am." She shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. "No, no one else was there. You didn't just save me. You saved her from losing me." Henry looked down at Lily, who gripped his hand tightly. "She's a brave one," he said softly. "She found help when it mattered most." Claire looked at him for a long moment. then said, "When I'm better, I want to talk. Not as your boss, as someone who owes you everything." 2 weeks later, she returned to the office. The company held a quiet ceremony in the lobby. Reporters had already caught wind of the story, the CEO who collapsed at work and was saved by her janitor. When Henry arrived, freshly shaven and wearing his cleanest shirt, he was stunned to find a small stage waiting for him. Claire stood there, radiant and alive, holding Lily's hand. "Today," she said to the gathered employees, "we celebrate a man most of us overlooked every single day. A man who didn't just clean our building. He reminded us of what really keeps it standing. Humanity." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Henry, I owe you my life. But more than that, you've reminded me that no position, no title, no corner office matters more than the people who stand quietly in the background making everything possible." Applause filled the lobby. Henry's face flushed red as Lily ran up and hugged his legs tightly. "Mom says you're my hero," she said, looking up at him. Henry smiled. "Your mom's the real hero, sweetheart. She just forgot how strong she was." Claire handed him an envelope. Inside was a promotion offer, head of building operations, with a salary and benefits he had never dreamed of. He tried to refuse, but she stopped him. "You've spent your life taking care of this building," she said softly. "Now let us take care of you." From that day forward, Henry's office moved from the basement to the top floor, right beside the woman whose life he had saved. And every morning, before the day began, he'd still hear that familiar voice from across the hall. "Morning, Mr. Henry." He'd grin back. "Morning, sunshine." Because sometimes heroes don't wear suits or carry titles. Sometimes they carry mops and courage, and when life collapses, they're the ones who remind the world how to breathe again. The story didn't end the day Henry saved Claire's life. It began there. Because after the flashing cameras faded and the reporters found new stories to chase, the real changes started happening quietly inside the walls of Bennett Enterprises. For years, the building had been a reflection of its CEO, sharp, immaculate, distant. People worked hard, but no one smiled much. Departments competed instead of collaborated. There were rules for everything but kindness. Yet after that day, something invisible shifted. Claire returned from her recovery not as the boss everyone feared, but as a woman who finally understood what it meant to live. On her first day back, she walked through the office floors without her usual entourage. No clipboard, no phone glued to her hand. Just her, moving slowly, noticing the people she had passed by for years. When she reached the janitorial wing, she paused at a narrow door with a gold plate that now read, "Henry Collins, Head of Building Operations." Inside, Henry was organizing supplies, still wearing his gray uniform even though she'd insisted he didn't have to anymore. "Still working too hard?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He smiled without looking up. "Can't help it. Old habits." "Your new office has a view," she reminded him. He chuckled. "I don't need a view. I already see everything that matters." She smiled softly. "You mean people?" He nodded. "People forget that buildings don't shine because of glass and marble. They shine because of the hearts that keep them going." That afternoon, she held a meeting, not in the conference room, but in the lobby. Every employee was invited. She stood in front of them, her voice clear but warm. "I used to think success meant control," she began. "But a man who works with his hands taught me that success is really about care. We've built a company that looks beautiful, but now it's time to make it feel beautiful." She introduced a new initiative, Project Humanity. It would focus on employee well-being, education grants for staff families, and full healthcare coverage for every worker, including custodial staff. When she finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, people began to clap, not because it was required, but because it was real. Later that week, Henry visited the hospital ward downtown, where Claire had once been treated. He walked in with a box of fresh flowers from Lily and handed them to the nurse on duty. "For the next person who thinks their life's too busy to rest," he said quietly. He still worked every day, still pushed his cart through the halls, though now people greeted him differently. "Morning, Mr. Collins," the executives said as they passed. "How's your team today?" He'd nod politely. "Doing our best to keep this place breathing." One afternoon, Lily ran up to him again, her braids bouncing. "Mr. Henry, Mommy says I can help you after school." He laughed. "Oh, really? You planning to mop floors or manage the building?" She grinned proudly. "Both." That night, Claire found them in the lobby, Henry teaching Lily how to polish the brass railing just right. "I think she's your new assistant," Claire teased. "She's already better at it than I am," Henry said with a smile. Claire knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You know, Lily, when you grow up, you can be anything you want, even a CEO." Lily frowned thoughtfully. "No, Mommy. I want to be like Mr. Henry. He helps people when they fall down." Claire's eyes softened. "Then I think you already are." The months passed, and the building changed in ways that no blueprint could capture. Employees started staying after hours, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Birthdays were celebrated in the break room. The janitorial staff got brand new equipment. People began to smile at each other in the hallways. And in the center of it all was Henry, the quiet man who'd reminded everyone what mattered most. One snowy morning, as he arrived before sunrise, he noticed a new plaque on the wall near the elevator. It read, "In honor of Henry Collins, whose hands kept this building clean and whose heart made it whole." He stood there for a long time, staring at it with tears in his eyes. Then he whispered, "You didn't have to do that." Behind him, a familiar voice said softly, "We did. Because every foundation needs the one who never lets it fall." It was Claire, holding Lily's hand. Lily smiled up at him. "Morning, Mr. Henry." He grinned, his eyes bright. "Morning, sunshine." And as they stood together in the warm glow of the lobby lights, it was clear that this wasn't just a building anymore. It was a family, built not by money or power, but by compassion, courage, and one ordinary man who chose to do something extraordinary when it mattered most. Winter melted into spring, and for the first time in years, the halls of Bennett Enterprises felt alive again. The laughter that echoed through the lobby didn't come from polished boardrooms. It came from the janitors, the receptionists, the people who had once been invisible. Henry had changed the soul of that building, and everyone knew it. But with every season that passed, change kept coming. One quiet morning, Henry arrived earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet reached the skyline, and the glass walls glowed faintly with the city's waking light. He walked the corridors like he always did, humming a tune under his breath, stopping to adjust a crooked picture frame in the hallway. A small photo of the entire staff taken at last year's Project Humanity celebration. As he straightened it, he caught sight of himself in the reflection. Gray hair, soft wrinkles, and a smile that still had the same warmth it did the day he met Lily. But behind that smile, there was something else now. A calm knowing that his work had come full circle. He had built more than order. He had built belonging. At exactly 7, the elevator opened and Claire stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble. "You're early," she said with a smile. "Old habits," Henry replied, glancing at her briefcase. "Big meeting today?" "Always," she said, then paused. "But not the kind you think. Come to the conference room at 9. And bring your coffee. You'll want to sit for this." Henry chuckled. "Now that sounds suspicious." When 9 o'clock came, the entire senior staff had gathered in the main conference room. Henry stood near the back, unsure why he'd been called there. After all, these meetings were usually about strategy, finance, or things far above his pay grade. Claire stood at the head of the long glass table, her voice steady. "Before we begin, I want to share something important." She turned toward Henry. 2 years ago, this company was on the verge of losing its soul. We were efficient, profitable, powerful, but hollow. Then a man reminded us that titles don't define worth, and that compassion is the real backbone of leadership. She smiled softly. "That man is standing in this room." The employees turned toward Henry, and before he could even react, applause filled the air. Claire continued, "Today, I'm announcing something new, the Henry Collins Fellowship. Every year, this program will fund full education scholarships for the children of our employees. Because no child should ever feel like their future is limited by what their parents can afford." Henry's breath caught. "Ms. Bennett, I don't." She shook her head. "You've given us more than you know, Henry. It's time we carry your legacy forward." The room erupted again, and Henry, always modest, simply stood there, smiling through tears he couldn't hide. After the meeting, Claire pulled him aside. "There's something else. I'm retiring at the end of this year." He blinked. "Retiring? You? You're too young to stop changing the world." She laughed softly. "I'm not stopping, just changing how I do it. I'm going to start a nonprofit foundation for workplace equality, and I want you on the board." He stared at her, stunned. Me? I don't even own a suit. She grinned. Then I guess we'll buy you one. He tried to protest, but she stopped him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. You once told me buildings don't shine because of marble, they shine because of hearts. I need yours on this one. That evening, when Henry got home to his small apartment, he found a package by his door. Inside was a brand new navy blue suit with a note tucked into the pocket. For the man who taught me how to rebuild a life. See you Monday, board member Collins. He laughed quietly, wiping his eyes as he held the note against his chest. The months rolled by, and with every passing week, Bennett Enterprises grew not just as a company, but as a family. Employees volunteered together at shelters, built scholarship funds, and celebrated each other's wins. Henry's name became more than just a story, it became a symbol. When winter came again, the company held its annual holiday gala. The ballroom shimmered with light, and as the evening went on, Claire took the stage one last time as CEO. Her voice wavered as she said, I used to think leadership was about standing above people. But the greatest leader I ever met stood beside me, with a mop in one hand and a heart full of courage in the other. She looked toward Henry. He didn't just clean this building. He cleaned the dust off our humanity. Henry rose slowly, his face red with emotion, and the entire room gave him a standing ovation. Lily, now a little taller and dressed in her first sparkly dress, ran up to him with a handmade card. On the front, written in big, messy letters, it said, Thank you for saving my mom and my heart. Henry knelt down, hugging her tight. You're the reason I did, sunshine. When the applause faded and the music started again, he looked across the room. At Claire, at Lily, at the people who had once passed him by without seeing him, and realized something simple yet profound. He had never needed to be rich or powerful to make a difference. He just needed to care when it counted. Years later, the Henry Collins Fellowship had helped hundreds of children go to college. And though he eventually retired, every time he visited the building, the new staff would whisper in awe, That's him. That's the janitor who saved the CEO. He would only smile and say, No, son, I just helped someone remember how to live. Because sometimes, the smallest hands can lift the heaviest hearts, and the quietest acts of kindness can echo louder than any speech ever could. Years later, when the city had grown taller and the name Bennett Enterprises gleamed from the skyline like a promise, the story of Henry Collins had already turned into something larger than anyone expected. Every intern who walked through those glass doors knew it. Every executive who took the elevator to the top floor knew it. Somewhere in the walls of that building, kindness lived. By then, Henry had retired. His hair was snow white now, his hands softer with age, but the quiet strength that had once saved a life hadn't left him. He spent his mornings at a small park near the river, feeding pigeons and watching the sunrise. Sometimes people would recognize him, the janitor who became a hero, and he would smile, humble as ever. Weren't you the man who saved the CEO? They'd ask. And he'd laugh. She saved herself. I just helped her remember she wasn't alone. It had been almost 10 years since that morning when he found little Lily crying in the hallway. She wasn't so little anymore. One afternoon, as he sat beneath the oak tree where he often fed the birds, he heard someone calling his name. Mr. Henry. He looked up to see a young woman jogging toward him, brown hair tied back, eyes bright, the same eyes that used to peek up from behind braids and pink backpacks. Lily. She grinned. You remembered. He chuckled. How could I forget the sunshine who used to chase me around the lobby with juice boxes? She laughed and sat beside him on the bench. Mom said I'd find you here. And how's your mom? She's good. Retired last year, Lily said. She started her own foundation, the Collins Initiative. It funds healthcare programs for workers who can't afford it. She says you inspired it. Henry looked down, overwhelmed. She didn't have to do that. She wanted to, Lily said softly. She said you gave her a second chance. She wanted to give others one too. Henry smiled, shaking his head. Your mother always had a bigger heart than she realized. They sat quietly for a while, watching the sunlight ripple across the river. Then Lily turned to him, her voice gentle. I came because I wanted to tell you something. I just graduated. I got my degree in business management, and next month, I'm joining Bennett Enterprises. Henry's face lit up. Look at you. Following in your mother's footsteps. She smiled. Not exactly. My title's different. I'm joining the Employee Welfare Division, the one that oversees the Henry Collins Fellowship. He froze. You're running it? She nodded. Starting next month. I want to make sure no one ever feels unseen in that company again. For a moment, Henry couldn't speak. His throat tightened, and he blinked back tears. Your mom must be proud. She is, Lily said softly. But I wanted to tell you first. Because you're the reason any of it exists. Henry took a shaky breath. You don't owe me anything, Lily. I do, she said, her eyes bright. You taught me what being strong looks like. It's not wearing a suit. It's showing up when no one else does. He smiled faintly, looking out over the water. You're going to do great things, kid. Because of you, she whispered. A few weeks later, Bennett Enterprises held its annual gala. The building had changed since Henry last visited. It was brighter, filled with art, laughter, and life. On the wall of the main lobby hung a massive portrait of him, mop in hand, smile gentle, eyes full of warmth. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In honor of Henry Collins. Proof that greatness begins with compassion." When Lily took the stage that night to introduce the next generation of fellowship recipients, she spotted him in the crowd, sitting quietly near the back. Their eyes met, and she smiled before speaking. My mother once told me a story, she began, about a man who didn't just save her life, he changed how she lived it. He taught her that kindness can rebuild what power destroys. Everything this company stands for today began with him. She gestured toward Henry. Please welcome the man who reminded us all what humanity really looks like. The crowd rose, clapping until the room shook. Henry stood slowly, humbled, smiling through tears. When the applause finally faded, he looked at Lily and said, You didn't need to do all this. She smiled back. You're wrong. We all did. After the event, as the lights dimmed and guests drifted away, Henry stood alone in the lobby. He walked to the plaque on the wall and touched the engraved letters softly. Claire appeared beside him, older now but still elegant, her eyes warm. You'll always have a home here, Henry. He chuckled. I already do. It's in every person who remembers to look down instead of only looking up. She laughed quietly, the same gentle sound that used to fill her office years ago. Still teaching lessons, even in retirement. Can't help it, he said. Old habits. As they stood together, watching the reflection of the city lights shimmer against the glass, Lily's voice echoed from across the room. Mr. Henry. He turned. She was holding a small candle, lavender-scented. Mom said this was your favorite, she said, handing it to him. He smiled. Thank you, sunshine. When they left the building that night, the wind was soft, carrying the scent of spring. Henry walked slowly down the street, the candle flickering in his hand. He paused once, looking back at the tower where it had all begun, where a little girl once ran screaming for help, where a janitor once knelt beside a fallen CEO, and where an entire company learned how to care. He whispered to himself, funny how one small moment can change everything. Then he smiled, his heart full, and walked away beneath the glowing city lights, leaving behind not a job or a title, but a legacy that would outlive them all. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.